Hello, first graders. I'm back in my little reading corner, which can only mean we're going to read the next installment in the A to Z mystery series. So, hopefully you have already seen the quicksand question, which is fantastic. So now we're on to the Runaway Racehorse. I'll give you a close up here. Chapter 1. Josh picked up a French fry, dipped it in ketchup, and drew his initials on his plate. When he ate the French fry, a glob of ketchup plopped onto his shirt. "Rats, this is my favorite t-shirt," Josh said. Dink put down his book and grinned at his freckle-faced, red-headed friend. "Was your favorite t-shirt," he said. Josh, Dink, and Ruth Rose were taking a train to Larchmont, New York to visit their friend Forrest Evans. Forrest and Dink's Uncle Warren had bought a racehorse together. So we met Forrest already. He was in the Orange Outlaw, and it was his painting that was stolen. And so now apparently he and Dink's uncle bought a racehorse together. The kids were invited to watch the horse, Whirlaway, run a race in Saratoga Springs. Josh picked up a napkin and wiped at the red stain. He only made it worse. "Josh is finger painting," Ruth Rose said to Dink. "Someday I'll be a famous ketchup artist," Josh said. He gazed out the window. "When do we get there?" "In a few minutes," Ruth Rose said, checking her train schedule. "I can't wait to see Whirlaway," Dink said. "I've never met a real racehorse before. All I can think about is horses. That's why I'm reading this." He held up his book. It was The Black Stallion by Walter Farley. The cover showed a beautiful black horse with wild eyes and a flowing mane. Dink Duncan's real name was Donald, but his middle name was David, and when he first started to talk and tried to say Donald David Duncan, it came out as Dink. Dink had been his nickname ever since. "Look what I brought," Ruth Rose said, pulling a book from her backpack. The cover showed a girl on a horse. The book's title was Learning to Ride. "Josh, did you bring a horse book?" Dink asked. Josh grinned. "Nope, I figured you guys will tell me anything I need to know." He dropped a few sugar cubes into his backpack. "Still hungry?" Dink teased. "They're for Whirlaway," Josh said. Just then the conductor walked through the dining car. "Larchmont is next," he told the kids. "Oh, wait," Ruth Rose said, digging in her backpack. She brought out her new camera. Ruth Rose liked to dress in all one color. Today, everything was white, from her headband down to her sneakers. Even her camera was white. "Would you please take our picture?" she asked the conductor. "My pleasure," said the man. He took the camera and focused it on the kids. "Say cheese." "Cheese," they all said. The conductor handed Ruth Rose her camera. "Have a great day," he said. The train slowed, then stopped. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose grabbed their backpacks and walked toward the end of the car. The conductor lowered a set of stairs, and the kids climbed down the platform. Dink heard someone call his name. He saw his Uncle Warren and Forrest Evans walking toward them. Dink's uncle was short and round and wore glasses. Forrest Evans had a trim brown beard and wore jeans and a t-shirt. "Why, it's Wink, Gosh, and Tooth Toes," Forrest said. The kids had met Forrest when his painting had gotten stolen from Uncle Warren's apartment. "Hi, Mr. Evans," they all said. "Please, call me Forrest, okay?" he asked. Dink hugged his uncle. The picture. So that must be Forrest then. "How was the train ride?" Uncle Warren asked. "Great," Josh said. "The hamburgers were awesome." Forrest led them to a black car and opened a rear door. The kids piled in with their backpacks. Uncle Warren sat next to Forrest up front. Forrest started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. "How many horses do you have?" Josh asked. "Just Whirlaway," Forrest said. "Do you race him?" Ruth Rose asked. Forrest laughed. "No, I'm too heavy. Professional jockeys are small and light. I hired a woman named Sunny to be Whirlaway's jockey." "Awesome," Josh said. "I've never met a girl jockey before." Then he added, "I've never met a boy jockey before either." Forrest slowed down near a group of small shops and flipped on his turn signal. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose all recognized the long tree-lined driveway. They had been here once before with Dink's uncle. A minute later, Forrest stopped at his garage. At the end of a stone path stood a large brick house. Out back, a stone barn nestled between the tennis courts and a swimming pool. "Here we are," Forrest said. The kids climbed out of the back seat with their backpacks. "When can we meet Whirlaway?" Josh asked, looking toward the barn. "Right now," Forrest said. Uncle Warren headed to the house while the kids followed Forrest toward the barn. Josh dug in his pocket and pulled out a sugar cube. "I brought this for Whirlaway," he said. "That was a nice idea, Josh," Forrest said, "but Whirlaway doesn't like sugar. He's the only horse I've ever seen who doesn't." Josh stuck the cube back in his pocket as the kids entered the cool, dim barn. Dink took a deep breath. "It smells nice in here," he said. I agree, Forrest said. He also took a deep breath. There's nothing like the sweet smell of hay and horse. Don't forget chocolate, Josh added. They all laughed as Forrest led the way to a stall near the barn's rear doors. The doors were open and the sunlight poured in. Out back was a truck parked in a wide gravel area. The stall door was also open, but there was no horse inside. That's funny, Forrest said, closing the stall door. He thought for a moment, then smiled. I'll bet Sonny took Whirlaway out for exercise, he said. They should be back soon. Let's go get you guys settled in the house. He led Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose back outside and into the house. They passed through a small room with boots on the floor and jackets hanging on pegs. This is the mudroom, Forrest said, untying and kicking off his boots. He took the kids through another door into the kitchen. The room was yellow with blue tiles on the counter and floor. Forrest pointed to a low bench. You can leave your backpacks there for now, he said. The kids stood their backpacks on the bench. Dink glanced at a newspaper clipping stuck to the refrigerator door with a magnet. There was a picture of a dark horse with a diamond-shaped blaze on its forehead. The headline read, Local Horse Beats All. Is that Whirlaway? Dink asked. That's him, Forrest said. He's real pretty, Ruth Rose said. He's even prettier in person, Forrest said, opening the fridge. You kids like fruit? We like everything, Josh said. Forrest set grapes and strawberries on the table. The kids sat down and began to snack. Suddenly, the door burst open. A small woman in jeans, riding boots, and a flannel shirt rushed into the kitchen. Hi, Sonny, Forrest said. Say hello to Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose. They're here to watch you and Whirlaway race tomorrow. He's gone, Sonny said, trying to catch her breath. Who's gone? Whirlaway, she said. I just got here to take him out. When I looked in his stall, it was empty. Oh, no, so they knew Whirlaway was gone, but they thought Sonny had him. But it turns out she doesn't have him either, so that's Sonny. And there's Forrest. And the chapter picture is of a horse, probably Whirlaway. And the corner picture are 2 horseshoes. Chapter 2. Forrest looked up in surprise. Then suddenly his face relaxed. Don't worry, I'll bet Whirlaway went to visit his mother again, Forrest said. I'll call Mr. Bunks. Who's Mr. Bunks? Ruth Rose asked. Tinker Bunks owns the ranch next to my property, Forrest said. He tried to raise horses for racing. He never had much luck, so he sold off his stock. That's how Warren and I got Whirlaway. Mr. Bunks kept Whirlaway's mother, a nice old mare named Biscuit. How does Whirlaway visit his mother? Dink asked. Sonny frowned. That rascal gets out of his stall and cuts through the woods, she said. I wonder when he got out this time, Forrest said. He was here this morning when Warren got here. We went in and visited him. So he could have been gone all day, Sonny said. Forrest nodded slowly. Yes, it's possible, Sonny, but let's not worry. Last time he ran away, I found him safe and sound munching hay with his mother. Forrest reached for the phone and dialed. He listened, then hung up. Mr. Bunks's line is busy, he said. He looked at the kids. If you're finished, why don't we jump in my truck and take a ride over there? I'll throw down some fresh straw in Whirlaway's stall, Sonny said. She headed out the door toward the barn. Forrest put the fruit back in the fridge, and the kids followed him out the kitchen door. He led them to the gravel parking area behind the barn. Forrest's pickup truck was filled with bales of hay. Who wants to ride in the back with the hay? Forrest asked. I do, Josh said. I will too, Ruth Rose said. Otherwise Josh will be scared. Just make sure you hang on, Forrest said. We're taking the old logging road through the woods, and it's pretty bumpy. Ruth Rose and Josh scrambled into the truck's bed and sat on hay bales. Dink climbed into the cab next to Forrest. Forrest started the truck and drove into the trees. Dink bounced in his seat as the tires rolled over bumps in the road. Low branches brushed the top of the cab. Dink turned around to look through the rear window. Josh and Ruth Rose were laughing and holding on to the sides of the truck. They are always doing dangerous things. I mean, I guess this is nothing compared to when they got on a stranger's boat that time, or when they got in a stranger's car that time when they got to the airport, but this is still not great. A few minutes later, they came out of the woods. Up ahead, Dink saw a barn and a house. Forrest pulled into the driveway and stopped behind another truck. A dog was tied to a nearby tree. He leaped up and started barking. Calm down, Buster, Forrest said out his window. Be a good dog. A man came from behind the barn. He was wearing a work shirt, jeans, and a leather belt with a big silver buckle. Muddy rubber boots came up nearly to his knees. Lie down, Buster, the man said. Buster stopped barking and flopped to the ground. Afternoon, Tinker, Forrest said. Tinker Bunks walked over and leaned on the door. He had a thin face, sharp blue eyes, and thick brows. Good day to you, Forrest, he said. That horse I sold you still running like the wind? Forrest nodded and smiled. He's won every race so far, he said. Winning is good, Mr. Bunks said. He looked off into the distance for a few seconds. But I'm glad the racing business is behind me now. A lot of work, horses. He peered into the cab. So, what brings you here today? I'm afraid Whirlaway has disappeared again, Forrest told Mr. Bunks. Any chance he's come to visit his mother? Mr. Bunks arched his eyebrows. Not as far as I know, he said, glancing toward the barn. Let's go have a look. The kids followed Mr. Bunks and Forrest into a large barn. As they entered, Dink heard a horse whinny. We hear you, Biscuit, Mr. Bunks said. The barn was cool and dim. Dust hung in the air where the sunlight came through the high windows. A loft held rows of hay bales. The floor was swept clean. Dink peeked into several stalls. Each was clean and empty. Mr. Bunks stopped at the stall with its top door open. A pale brown horse with dark eyes stood there waiting. He had a small white mark on his forehead. This is Whirlaway's mom, Forrest told the kids. He patted Biscuit on her nose. Have you seen your son today, old girl? Mr. Bunks asked his horse. As if she understood, Biscuit shook her large head from side to side. I thought for sure he'd be here, Forrest said. He peered into a few of the empty stalls. I'm afraid you've wasted your time, Forrest told Mr. Bunks. Come on, kids. It's time to call the police. Oh no, that's the end of that chapter. So Whirlaway isn't visiting his mother like they were hoping. And here's Whirlaway's mother and the kids. And then this is Tinker Bunks. And then it's part of the barn. Chapter 3. Tinker Bunks looks serious. If he shows up, I'll give you a shout. I'd appreciate that, Forrest said. He's running at Saratoga tomorrow. Is he now? Mr. Bunks said. I wish you luck. They all left the barn. The sky had grown darker. As Forrest drove through the woods, Dink heard thunder. Wind began to whip tree branches back and forth. Forrest drove faster. I'd better get us home before Josh and Ruth Rose have a shower, he said. Forrest parked behind the barn just as raindrops began to splatter the windshield. Let's run for it, he said, leaping from the cab. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose ran squealing as the clouds opened up. In seconds, they were soaking wet. Inside the house, Forrest handed them towels. They dried their hair and faces. Why don't you settle in while I call the police, he said. Ruth Rose, you're in the blue bedroom. Guys, you're bunking right across the hall. The kids grabbed their backpacks and headed toward the back of Forrest's house. Ruth Rose stopped outside a bedroom with blue wallpaper. See you guys in a minute, she said, and disappeared inside. Dink and Josh walked into their room and changed into dry shirts. A minute later, Ruth Rose knocked and came in. Her wet hair was even curlier than usual. What could have happened to Whirlaway? She asked Dink and Josh. Dink looked out the bedroom window. Through the rain, he could see the barn, but he couldn't see the barn's rear doors. You know, someone could have stolen him, Dink said. Stolen him? Josh said. In broad daylight? Dink pointed. You can't see the back doors of the barn from the house, he said. Anyone could go in and out that way. Ruth Rose peered through the streaming window. How would you steal a horse? He asked. Would you need a trailer? Or the thief could just ride him away, Josh said. Let's go look behind the barn for clues when the rain stops, Ruth Rose said. Maybe the police had some good news for Forrest, Dink said. They headed for the kitchen. Forrest was also staring out the window into the rain. His shoulders were hunched and he was nervously tapping his fingers on the counter. Uncle Warren was sitting at the table drinking a mug of tea. Did you call the police? Dink asked. Forrest turned away from the window and nodded. Yes, they told me no one's called in about a stray horse, he said. I'm getting worried. Do you think someone might have stolen him? Dink asked. Forrest looked at him and blinked a few times. Stolen Whirlaway? I suppose it's possible. Forrest, have you any neighbors who own horses? Uncle Warren asked. A few. Why? Because Whirlaway may not be the only missing horse, said Uncle Warren. Perhaps you should call around. Good idea. I will, Forrest said. We'll help you look for him when the rain stops, Ruth Rose said. Forrest nodded. That'll be great. Now I'd better get on the phone, he said as he left the kitchen. The kids drank milk and ate cookies with Uncle Warren. They watched the rain streak through the windows, down the windows. Forrest came back a few minutes later. I called 2 friends who own horses, he said. None are missing, but my friend said they'll keep an eye out for Whirlaway. The rain continued. They played Scrabble. When it wasn't his turn, Forrest kept jumping up to call more neighbors. Finally, the rain stopped, when the clouds cleared. When Dink looked out the window, sunlight sparkled off trees and bushes. I'll go pick up some food for dinner, Uncle Warren said. He took a set of car keys from the hook and left the house. Okay, kids, let's go have a look for my horse, Forrest said. He and the kids put on sneakers and headed through the kitchen door to the yard. The wet grass squished under their feet. They walked behind the barn. Forrest headed toward the woods, whistling and yelling. Whirlaway! Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose checked the wet ground for tire tracks or footprints. Nothing, Josh muttered. Even if there were clues, the rain washed them away. Suddenly, the kids heard a soft whinny from inside the barn. Dink yelled for Forrest, who came running. Whirlaway? Forrest said. They all ran into the barn. Standing outside Whirlaway's stall was a wet, muddy horse. Where have you been, boy? Forrest asked his horse. Whirlaway shook his head. Water and mud flew off his mane. He stomped his front foot and gazed at the humans. Forrest walked over and grasped Whirlaway's halter. It, too, was muddy. Forrest laughed and shook his head. Looks like you've been rolling in a big mud puddle, he said. Kids, do you know how to wash a horse? Yes, Josh said. We wash my pony all the time. Forrest pointed to a hose and some buckets and sponges. He handed Ruth Rose a container of green soap. Just be careful of his feet, he said. Forrest snapped a leather lead onto Whirlaway's halter, then hooked the end to a post. Rinse off the mud first, then soap him down good. So, he's back. That's exciting. But this horse is covered in mud. Yuck. Just then they heard a phone ringing from the house. I'd better get that, Forrest said. When Whirlaway is dry, just put him back in his stall. He hurried back into the house. Dink filled a bucket with water, then turned the hose on Whirlaway. The horse stood still as muddy water cascaded off his sides. Ruth Rose poured some soap into the bucket, making the water turn green. The suds smelled like freshly cut grass. The kids soaked 3 big sponges in the soapy water. They each began washing a different part of the horse. Whirlaway rolled his eyes and tried to watch all 3 kids. Hey, look at this, Josh said. He pointed to the horse's side. There was a mark in the mud. It was egg-shaped, about as big as his hand. Inside the oval was some kind of wiggly shape. Josh, have you been finger painting again? Ruth Rose teased. I didn't do that, Josh said. It was already there. The 3 kids looked closely at the imprint. It almost looks like someone stamped him with something, Josh said. Interesting. So, I don't know how to show you this. There it is. They see a weird mark on Whirlaway stamped in the mud. Interesting. Chapter 4. Whirlaway could have gotten that when he was rolling in the mud, Dink said. He probably rolled over a rock or a piece of wood. Yeah, probably, Josh said. He wiped his soapy sponge over the strange sign and it disappeared. Dink trained the hose on Whirlaway again to rinse off the soap. Ruth Rose found some towels hanging on the wall, and they rubbed Whirlaway's coat. When he was dry and shining, Ruth Rose unhooked Whirlaway's lead from the post and put him in his stall. Come on, boy, he said. Whirlaway rolled his eyes at Ruth Rose. He stiffened his legs and refused to walk. Good job, kids, Forrest said as he walked into the barn. He looks like a new horse. He won't go in his stall, Ruth Rose said. Let me try, Forrest said. He took the lead from Ruth Rose and began stroking Whirlaway's neck. He spoke softly in the horse's ear. After a minute, Whirlaway walked into a stall. He stuck his nose in the oats bucket and began eating. Forrest closed the stall door behind Whirlaway. He was probably a little spooked from being out during the storm and coming home to all these strangers, he said. Just then, Sunny rode through the barn's rear doors on a mountain bike. She hopped off, leaned the bike against the wall, and strode over to in tall, muddy boots. There's the bad boy, she said, reaching over the stall door to pet his nose. Whirlaway rolled his eyes, threw his head back, and backed into a corner. Easy, boy, Sunny muttered. She looked at Forrest. He seems scared of me. He did the same thing with me, Ruth Rose said. The 5 humans watched the horse, who was also watching them. Maybe he doesn't feel good, Dink suggested. Could he have eaten something bad while he was gone? Josh asked. It's possible, Forrest said, but he looks fine, and he just ate some oats. Sunny studied the horse. I hope he runs okay tomorrow. He seems very afraid of her. How far away is Saratoga? Dink asked. A few hours. It's near Albany, Sunny told him. I wonder if any of you have been to Saratoga Springs. It's not that far from here. She looked at Forrest. I'll come over at 6 and load Whirlaway into the trailer. I'll be there in plenty of time for him to relax before this race. Good, Forrest said. Now let's go see what Warren brought for our supper. Forrest looked at his horse. No more disappearing tricks, fella, he said. Sunny pulled the stall's top door shut and checked that the latch was in place. See you tomorrow in Saratoga, she said. The kids watched her straddle her mountain bike and ride out the door. She looked funny pedaling a bike in muddy rubber boots. Uncle Warren was back with the groceries. Soon they were all eating a hearty meal. After supper, they finished the Scrabble game. At 9 o'clock, Forrest stood up and yawned. Long day tomorrow, he said. I'm ready to turn in. Sounds good to me, too, said Uncle Warren. See you all in the morning. He patted Dink on the head and left the room. The kids padded down the hall to their rooms. As Dink and Josh were crawling into their beds, they heard a knock. Ruth Rose opened the door. Nice Daffy Duck jammies, Josh, she said, marching into the room with her book. Quack, quack, Josh said. Ruth Rose sat on the end of Dink's bed with a book in her lap. I want to read you guys something, she said. Oh, goody, Josh said. Can we have milk and cookies, too? Ruth Rose held up her book. This is really about learning to ride your own horse, she said, but there's a chapter about jockeys. She opened the book and began reading. Jockeys must earn the horse's trust. A good jockey does this by feeding and grooming the horse regularly. Most horses learn to like their jockeys and become friends. Ruth Rose looked up from her page. Does anything strike you about that? She asked. Like what? Said Josh. Well, did you notice how Whirlaway acted around Sunny? Ruth Rose said. He sure didn't seem very friendly to her, said Dink. Yeah, he backed away as soon as she came in, said Josh. Exactly, Ruth Rose said. I think Whirlaway is afraid of Sunny. Interesting. So why would Whirlaway be afraid of Sunny? The book she was reading said that jockeys and horses are usually friends. Chapter 5. Maybe we'll read one more in this video. Chapter 5. A hand on his shoulder woke Dink from a sound sleep. The light next to the bed was on. The black stallion lay on the bed covers, still open. Through sleepy eyes, he looked into his uncle's face. "Morning, Donnie," Uncle Warren said quietly. "Time to get up." "Hi, Uncle Warren," Dink said. "You boys have to hop to it," Uncle Warren said. "Forrest wants to get on the road right after breakfast." He smiled at Dink and left the room. Dink tossed his pillow over on Josh's bed, then walked into the bathroom. Josh grumbled, but soon they were both dressed and headed for the kitchen. Forrest and Ruth Rose were sitting at the table eating oatmeal. Uncle Warren took a pot off the stove and filled bowls for Dink and Josh. "Everyone sleep all right?" Forrest asked. "I did," Ruth Rose said. She spooned some brown sugar over her cereal. Today her color was purple. Purple leggings, purple blouse, purple headband, purple sneakers. "Me too," said Dink, "except for Josh's snoring all night." They ate quickly, then left the house and piled into Forrest's car. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose sat in the back seat. They each had their books, and Josh had brought his pillow. Forrest turned out of the driveway and drove through Larchmont. After making a few turns, he was on a wide highway. Dink saw a sign that said Albany, 120 miles. A few hours later, they arrived in Saratoga Springs. Forrest pulled his car into the parking lot. They all climbed out of the car and stretched their legs. Under tall trees, Dink saw long green barns. Near the barns, men and women were grooming horses, feeding horses, exercising horses. There were horses everywhere. Ruth Rose took pictures of horses and one of a barn with the sun shining on the green wood. "Let's go find Sunny," Forrest suggested. "She'll be in barn E, stall number 21. They cut through some trees followed a wide path. Barns stood on both sides of the path. Each barn had a large letter painted on the side. The gravel walkway was crowded with people. Some were walking horses, others just looking. I'll show you one page at a time here. Looks like there's Forrest and the uncle, and there's the kids. And there are people everywhere. Some horses in the background, too. "There's barn E," Josh said, sprinting ahead. Forrest, Uncle Warren, and the kids found Sunny outside stall 21. She had one foot on a bale of hay and was buffing her riding boot with a cloth. A can of black boot polish sat on the floor. "Hi, Sunny," Forrest said. Sunny wore white riding pants. Her silk racing shirt was green with yellow stripes on the arms. Circling her left arm was a cloth band with the number 21 stitched on it. Her hair was tucked up under a hard hat covered in yellow silk. Oval-shaped goggles rested on the hat's visor. She was dressed for a race. Sunny dropped the cloth and smiled. "Hi, everyone," she said. "Any problems?" Forrest asked. "He didn't want to walk into the trailer this morning," Sunny said, "and he definitely didn't like me getting him ready once we got here." "Good morning, Whirlaway," Forrest said to his horse. "Why are you giving Sunny a hard time, eh, boy?" Everyone peered into the stall. Whirlaway was standing in a corner with his eyes on the newcomers. "He looks terrific, Sunny," Forrest said. "Nice job." Sunny had brushed Whirlaway's coat till it gleamed. The white tape she'd wrapped around his ankles looked snowy against the nearly black coat. "Why do you wear goggles?" Ruth Rose asked Sunny. "To protect my eyes," Sunny said. "During races, the horses in front of me kick up dirt. You should see when I race in the rain, totally covered in mud." "What time is the race?" Dink asked. "We're in the second one," Sunny said. 2:00. "We'll be cheering you on," Uncle Warren said. "Can I take a picture of you and Whirlaway?" Ruth Rose asked. "Sure," Sunny said. She walked into the stall and put her hand on Whirlaway's halter. Whirlaway rolled his eyes at her and threw his head back. "Ruth Rose is right," thought Dink. "Whirlaway doesn't like Sunny at all." Ruth Rose snapped a picture. That's the end of that chapter. And we're about halfway through. So I think we'll pause here for now. I'm wondering what your theories are so far. Why would Whirlaway not like Sunny? Why is he acting so strange? We'll find out in the next video. Hope to see you then. Bye.